Welcome to the Word Potions podcast. I'm Christopher King, and this is Strangers at Bars Sometimes Bite, Part 8. Get up, Hampton. I won't repeat myself. I stumbled out of my bed, hurriedly checking the time. 5:30 in the morning, I groaned to myself as I rushed into the living room and found Eladra, bare-chested, already doing his exercises. With my advancement and the ranger's cloak, I was afforded a bit more freedom, although I was still expected to fulfill certain requirements each day. I requested a watch, which Eladra obtained for me. It was a cheap digital display that showed me the date, time, and either AM or PM. I rubbed my eyes and followed his example, dropping into a push-up position and doing sets of 20. The wound in my shoulder throbbed with every push as I cycled through the exercise. I glanced at the place where the arrow had struck me and didn't see any blood, so I pushed through the pain. Discipline in mind as well as body is important. Remember that, Hampton. Yes, sir. I mumbled between the puffs of breath as I did a set of push-ups. The cool stone floor of the room wasn't unpleasant, as Eladra always kept the electric room heaters humming when we were at home. We cycled through a series of different bodyweight exercises, including push-ups, pull-ups, squats, and various other things. After our last exercise, Eladra asked me to make some breakfast. I happily complied. I made a disgusting sort of lichen tea that Eladra seemed to love, but when I tried it, I couldn't get around the taste of greenery and earth. I wished for a strong cup of coffee, but I knew there was no chance I was going to be able to get any. I cooked strips of algaki meat and a sort of tuber that grew on some of the outlying farms. We sat together at a small two-person table and enjoyed our food together. The algaki meat was slightly sweet, and I'd added a little bit of salt to it. Eladra went over some scouting reports from some of his men. We enjoyed our food in silence. After breakfast, Eladra trained me in sword skills for about 3 hours. I progressed much faster than I had during my previous training. Brevin was good with a blade and served as a good dueling partner. Eladra, however, was a master. I never so much as breached his guard or landed a blow. He seemed to flow from one strike to the next with an effortless grace and poise. He never used more strength than was required, and he controlled the blade as if it was an extension of his arm. By comparison, I was a clumsy oaf, using too much strength and energy for a single strike. To his credit, Eladra never shamed me or berated me for my clumsy efforts. He never struck me harder than a soft tap with the training blades. This was different than the initial group training. There, he had beat us into submission without batting an eyelash. His words had been forceful and direct. But here, he corrected my mistakes with gentle instruction, explaining how and why it was wrong, and what to do to correct my poor form or mistakes. On occasion, he had me pause and redo a strike I'd done improperly until I got it right. After our practice sessions, I was required by him to study classic Elvar literature. The poems of Masabi, The Division of Worlds by Bartum Nashil, and the Magus records from the Age of Power many millennium past. This usually took me into lunch, which I generally prepared while he wrote more letters and recorded more data. Today I was especially excited. Eladra had given me some time to myself for lunch. He claimed that he needed to go on a special errand and told me I could do what I liked with the time while he was gone. His exact words were, "I'll be gone for a bit. Get out and explore if you like. Just be back in 2 hours." I longed to see Eladra again, and possibly show her how far I'd come in the past few weeks. So I decided to go find her. Eladro's abode was very close to Gate Square. He preferred to be close to the heart of Elhaven in case something went wrong. I walked to the gate guard's barracks and entered the low building. I approached the first Elvar that I saw. "Hello, have you seen Eladra around?" "Who's asking?" replied the guard. He was sitting on a bed reading from a small book. "Hampton." "The new half-being? Piss off." "What a rude Elvar. Just tell me where she is and I'll leave." He glared up at me. "And what will you give me in return?" "The satisfaction of knowing you've assisted the Ranger Corps." "Fine. She's patrolling near the food vendors in the eastern corridor. Now leave me alone." I thanked him, then left, and made my way to the eastern corridor. I found Eladra walking with a group of guards. She was walking next to another male. She turned to him and they touched foreheads before he walked off. "Hello, Eladra." She whirled around, a guilty look on her face. "Oh, I didn't see you there, Hampton. Don't sneak up on me." My stomach clenched as I looked into her eyes, but I pushed the feeling to the side. "It's okay. I was just coming to see if you'd like to eat lunch with me." Her eyes widened, and she glanced around. "You wish to eat food with me?" "Yeah, of course." She gazed at me with her large eyes. I wanted to keep staring into them, but I glanced away with a force of will. "No need to make things weird, Hampton. I was thinking you could show me some of the food here. Being a sort of port of entry and exit, there must be food vendors around." She flashed her sharp canines at me in a bright smile. "Of course there is. I don't eat there often because it's sort of expensive, but it's very tasty." We walked in silence for a while before I got up the courage to ask, "Who is that Elvar you were with?" "That was just Heldon. Me and him are paired. However, the pairing isn't set for a few years." "Paired for what?" I asked, glancing out of the corner of my eye. "I think you Mundani call it marriage?" "Wait, you're engaged?" A twisting feeling began coiling in my chest. I'd never experienced this before, and I hated it. I suppose that's one way to describe it. As an Elvar female, one of my expected duties is to create strong younglings. The Elvar Council decides who is genetically the most compatible to create strong offspring, so as to boost our ranks and keep our bloodline strong. Well, this is just great. "That's interesting," I said softly. "My father says it's a terrible tradition. I think I agree with him. I care for Heldon, but only as a fellow Elvar. Our parts may be compatible, but I don't believe our minds are." "No, your minds are not." "Yeah, I definitely think you can do better," I said, deciding I didn't much like this Heldon. "It's complicated. I've been meaning to speak with Heldon. However, he doesn't understand, as his traditionalist sense of duty sometimes blinds him. It would bring shame upon my family name and it would anger Heldon. On top of all that, I would be seen as a deviant who doesn't have the best interests of our race in mind. Many of my friends would abandon me." She glanced at me in an almost shy way. "Got it. So you don't want to look bad." "It's not that simple, Hampton," she snapped, swinging around to face me, making my name sound more like a curse. "Ooh, that may have been the wrong thing to say. Try again, Hampton." I held my hand up in surrender. "Sorry, I didn't mean to insult you. For the record, I think you should be excited about getting married, and if you're not, that may be a sign that this Elvar male isn't for you. You sound like my father. He's constantly telling me that staying true to myself is more important than cultural honor, but I don't even know what staying true is. I don't really know what I want." "Well, I think it's sticking to your guns when something is hard, even when everyone else is telling you it's the wrong decision. I'm tired of this. I have plenty of time to decide what I want. Let's just get some food, eh?" She looked slightly frustrated, so I let the subject go. We walked side by side in the narrow tunnels, and a few times our shoulders bumped into each other. Each one sent an electric thrill into my chest. I was keenly aware of her presence. She was fit and athletic. The guard's standard issue clothing clung to her in all the right places. God, she's pretty. Wait, don't think about her like that. Crap. Am I falling for an engaged woman? Say something so this isn't weird. I forced my eyes to follow the natural cave walls. "So, where are we going?" I asked. "There's this place near here that sells a sort of fried fish. It's so good." "What do you like about them?" I smiled as we exited the narrow tunnel and entered the circular cavern known as Gate Square. "They just have a really good flavor, and the crunch is oddly satisfying." Her eyes lit up at the thought of the delicious food. "I'll have to introduce you to tacos." "What are tacos?" she asked. "It's literally everything you just described. Crunchy shell filled with delicious flavors." As we walked down the edge of the cavern following the flow of traffic, the large curved gates hummed with power, and the familiar instructions echoed around us. "Keep belongings with you at all times." Groups of mythical creatures walked around going about their business. I saw a herd of centaur trot past, carrying packs that looked suspiciously like camping gear on their backs. We made our way through the crowds of people, walking about, chatting excitedly and pointing to things. Eladra led me to a tunnel that had neon signs above it, advertising food vendors. They looked out of place in the cave, as almost no other place I'd been to advertised with them. "That's different," I commented, pointing to the signs. "Yeah, several gate guard captains have attempted to remove those glowing signs. However, the food vendors love that sort of stuff, and so do the visitors apparently. These vendors make up a sizable portion of Elhaven's income. As if to illustrate her point, I saw that a steady stream of people poured in and out below the neon signs. We joined them and soon arrived at a cavern about a quarter of the size of Gate Square. Small stalls had been carved into the rock of the cavern walls, and I could see tons of electrical wires going to each one. Delicious smells filled the air, and my stomach rumbled in anticipation. The sounds of sizzling and cooking could be heard just above the buzz of people, and a happy atmosphere hung over the well-lit cavern. I followed Eladra as she joined a line of people waiting for a particular stall. It had a neon sign above it that said, Fishery. It was a combination of fishmonger and fast food stall. The cooks were busy gutting up fish into cubes, rubbing them in some sort of green dust, and dropping them into large bowls of boiling liquid. The smell was intoxicating. I was beginning to grow hungry again. My stomach grumbled, and I impatiently waited for our turn. Let me guess. That green stuff is lichen? Precisely, was Eladra's reply. Do you guys use it for everything? I asked in disgust. Yes, pretty much. It's extremely nutritious and easy to grow, was her exuberant reply. I sincerely hoped it tasted good. I was tired of seeing this plant in everything I wanted to eat. Eladra ordered 2 portions of a certain dish, and they fried it up for us. We received them on thin, small stone slabs that acted as plates. The first bite was heavenly. It tasted like a sort of fish stick, but the second bite, I could tell a lichen was there. I ate the rest of the fish, but I wish they just deep fried it with a flour-based batter instead. As we exited the cave, we began walking back the way we'd come. A voice called out to Eladra. Eladra, taking lunch early? I turned around and saw the same Elvar Eladra had touched foreheads with. She saw him and turned a slight shade paler. Hampton, how goes it? I thought you were on your way to the western corridor. He looked at her, then at me, suspicion in his eyes. I jumped into the conversation. She is. She just wanted a bite to eat, and I happened to run into her here. Right, was his curt reply. The western corridor is that way. He gestured in the opposite direction we'd been walking. I must be off on my rounds. Have a good shift, Eladra. He stiffly walked away. He seemed upset. I commented as I watched him join a group of other guards. He talked with them and nodded in my direction. They exchanged looks, then watched as I left with Eladra. Eladra frowned and glanced worriedly back the way they'd come. Hampton is a complicated Elvar. Once he gets an idea into his head, it doesn't leave. My father had a strong reputation as a Mundani lover, and by extension, I have that title as well. My father met my mother when she had a deep spelunking accident and got trapped in a deep cave. My father found her and took care of her. Somehow, they fell in love and I was conceived. She died many years ago of some incurable Mundani sickness. I never really knew her, but people say that his love for her changed him. I'm worried Hampton may become jealous of our time together and do something to you. I was fascinated. This was the most she'd ever opened up to me about her family. It made me feel close to her. Don't worry about me. I've been training with Alvaro. Besides, wouldn't that be illegal here? You can't just go around assaulting people. You can if you're a part of the governing body. Oh, was my only reply. I checked my watch and cringed. I'm not going to make it back to Alvaro's in time. I'm sorry, Eladra, but I have to go. Alvaro is expecting me back soon. She nodded and smiled. I must report to my duty station anyways. Have a blessed day. I waved, then began running back toward Gate Square and Alvaro's place. I sprinted around a sharp bend in the cave and didn't see the arm until a split second before it was too late. It hit me in the neck, causing me to fall backwards and gasp for air. A gate guard stepped out of the shadows and flicked on his radio. Yeah, I got him, Hampton. 3rd service corridor, leading to Gate Square. I tried to get to my feet and stand up, but the Elvar swung his rifle around to bear at my chest. Not so fast, half-being. I reached for my sword, however it wasn't there. Damn it, if only Alvaro would let me carry Kilzar. What seems to be the trouble, guard? I'm just passing through. I must return to the head ranger. If I'm not back soon, he's going to come looking for me. A different voice cut through the gloom. I don't think he will. It was the arrogant voice of Hampton. You're not worth his time. In fact, you're not worth anything to anybody, Hampton said as he stepped into view. Dredge, you pissant. I wasn't sure what the insult meant, but it seemed like it fit the moment. Hampton gritted his teeth and nodded to the guard, who kicked me in the stomach. Silence, fool. Your disrespect grates on my nerves. I'm here to tell you to stay away from my promised partner. Everyone knows the Hentor lineage enjoys Mundani company, and as such, I feel it's my obligation to make sure that never happens. He stepped forward to grab my shirt, however the other Elvar warned him. Be careful, Heldon. He is a ranger, called the first Elvar. He is a ranger in training, corrected Heldon. You can teach anyone tricks these days, I suppose. He stepped back and crossed his arms in front of himself. You reek of affection for her. I stiffened and I felt my face began to grow hot. That's not true, I lied. Heldon smirked. Just watch yourself, half-being. I don't like people thinking they can take what's been promised to me. Elvar tradition is sacred and must be upheld. The choice is hers to make, I responded calmly. Maybe she just prefers my company to yours? Not likely. My presence is a gift to those around me. After all, I am the son of High Noble Castor. Respect me or I will have a conversation with my father about you. Come. He motioned to the guard and began walking away. Remember, Hampton, she has been promised to me. Our superior genes will create the next generation of warriors. The best you'll ever be is a halfling freak, changed by science. And next time, I will not be so lenient on the physical punishment. I growled deep in my throat. I almost wish Lazuli would get rid of that family. I picked myself up and dusted off my clothes. I began jogging the way I'd been headed before getting ambushed. I arrived at Avlaro's place 7 minutes past when I was supposed to. However, Avlaro wasn't there, which seemed odd to me. He usually greeted me with a frown if I was late, or a nod if I was on time. I glanced around the low stone living space, taking note of the sparse appearance. It wasn't like an American home. By contrast, this living space was cramped. The ceiling was low, and little to no furniture decorated the area. 2 separate sleeping quarters branched off the main area. One for me and one for Avlaro. I sat down on a rock that had been chipped into the shape of a bench, with algaki hides thrown over top to add padding. I stroked the fur and decided it was similar to a bear pelt. I heard a scuff at the entrance and Avlaro strode in, throwing a set of clothes at me. I caught them. What are these for? Those are traditional male garb. Try them on. Yes, sir. I pulled apart the clothes and found that they were a white shirt with a large cloak, baggy pants made out of soft material, and a decorative scabbard. I put on the clothes and tried to look at myself. There wasn't a mirror in here, so I had to content myself with twisting and turning to get a glance of my clothes. These look funny. They will make you look more like an authentic Elvar. Why the clothes? I asked. The High Lord Castor will be arriving tomorrow. We want to make a good impression, so these will help you do that. It looks like everything fits as it should. The High Noble will finally be here? I felt excitement, then dread after remembering my run-in with his son. What do you know about Heldon? I asked Avlaro. He looked at me suspiciously. Why? What do you want to know about him? I know he is the High Noble's son. How do you know that? Hissed Avlaro. He accosted me in the tunnels and told me. Why did he do that? Avlaro asked me, a dangerous look in his eyes. He saw me walking with Eladra. I wasn't sure why, but all of a sudden I felt guilty. Ugh, Evla's help. Avlaro groaned, rubbing his brow. Do you not understand anything? That is courtship behavior and a publicly directed insult to Heldon's right as the primed pair to Eladra. She must have gone along with you willingly, or this wouldn't be an issue, which means she isn't sure about Heldon. She isn't? I asked rather too hopefully. Which means you just made enemies with the family of Castor. Hampton, this is a big deal, and potentially deadly for you. Is there anything I can do? I asked, looking into Avlaro's disapproving stare. Publicly renounce Eladra and never speak to her again? What the fuck? I can't do that. She's my friend. I stared at him in disbelief. Would you rather meet an unfortunate accident in some distant tunnel? This is ridiculous. I just had lunch with her. That's it. You shared food with another Elvar as promised? That practically makes you a pair. Avlaro stared at me, a hint of anger now boiling underneath. Oh. I trailed off as the full weight of realization hit me. I just unintentionally declared war on the most powerful Elvar on the world of Evlis. I began again. I never agreed to that, and neither did she. She said she didn't want to make a decision. She made a decision by not saying no. haven't you read Courtship and Etiquette by Falgren Mester? Alvaro asked me. No, that seemed boring, so I skipped ahead to more interesting sounding books. I will help you, Hampton. I realize you're still new here, but you're trying my patience. I'm sorry, I didn't realize, I replied, looking down at the floor. If we can fix this before the High Lord Caster arrives, you will be fine. Strap on your blade, we may need it. Why are you helping me, Alvaro? He paused at the entrance of our living space. Because, as your mentor, I will have to front the responsibilities of your mistakes. You will learn in time, but we must go make this right. I buckled on Kilzar and rested my hand on the handle for a moment. I felt a familiar sense of courage enter me and a tingle at the back of my mind. Let's go find Heldon. Perhaps we can make peace with him. I followed Alvaro as we made our way to Gate Square, then to the last known place that I'd seen the guards. They were nowhere to be seen. Alvaro found a nearby guard and asked him to phone where Heldon was. After a moment on the radio, he told us that Heldon wasn't answering, but that he'd been patrolling the border tunnels near Gelfen village. That's not a safe place, muttered Alvaro. We traveled for about another 20 minutes by foot before arriving at Gelfen. It was just a few homes carved into the cavern with a small pen for Algaki. Alvaro asked one of the farmers if they had seen a gate guard pass through. They said yes and directed us the right way. We walked down a few corridors and came upon a crumpled Elvar body in an ever-expanding pool of blood. It was Heldon. His throat had been cut. Oh God, I whispered. Did you do this? Asked Alvaro, accusation loaded in his voice. I promise I didn't, I replied, desperation clawing at the edges of my voice. Okay, I believe you. I just needed to hear you say it, but how can we prove it? Alvaro searched the body. Besides a few personal effects, there didn't seem to be anything worth noting. As I turned away, a twinkle in the low light caught my attention. A sort of metal disc had fallen between a few rocks. It would have been missed if it wasn't for the reflection of the light perfectly bouncing off the surface, alerting me to its presence. I stopped to pick it up and turn the metallic disc over in my hand. I handed it to Alvaro. He examined it and frowned. This is the seal of the High Noble Caster's family. Usually the head of the family carries this with them at all times. What does it mean? I asked. I'm not sure, but we better go. We need to get back to Elhaven before someone sees us with the body and thinks the wrong thing. I wouldn't be worried if this was just a regular Elvar, but things always get more complicated when high nobles are involved. I heard the pounding steps of running feet. They went this way. Quick, we must protect Heldon. Don't run, replied Alvaro. It'll just make us seem guilty. What if they start shooting? I asked. Alvaro ignored the question and waved to the running Elvar as they came into sight. Over here! We found Heldon! The group of Elvar skidded to a halt at the end of the passageway, eyeing me and Alvaro. I could see tension in the way they carried themselves. One of them raised his rifle and aimed at us. Surrender, and we won't shoot, yelled the Elvar, pointing a gun at us. All of a sudden, a deep boom echoed around the cavern, and the Elvar spun to the side. He clutched his shoulder, dropping the rifle aimed at us. I glanced behind us. There stood Lazuli, grinning wickedly, clutching a smoking hand cannon. He beckoned to us. Now's a good time to run. A shot cracked toward us from down the passageway, splintering rock a few feet from my head. Murderers! Shouted an Elvar. I didn't hesitate as I ran around the corner of the cavern tunnel, breaking the line of sight of the pursuing Elvar. You fool! Shouted Alvaro. They were willing to talk, but now our chances are as dead as Heldon. No, they were sent to kill you both. I'll explain later. Our pursuers were gaining on us. I could hear their shouts and stamping feet coming up the passageway. Alvaro stopped and drew both his blades. I'll buy us some time. Don't be a fool. If they were sent to kill us, you won't last a long time against guns. I spoke at him forcefully, but my words didn't seem to move Alvaro's resolve. Alvaro pushed me back and I reluctantly sprinted up the cave following Lazuli. A few moments later from behind us, I heard the shouts of surprise and the clash mixed in with the shots of weapons. Screams began following us up the cave, then one by one were silenced. Next left, then a right, called Alvaro. I sprinted hard. I took the next left, then a right off the edge of a sheer cliff. Thank you for listening to the Word Potions podcast. Tune back in next week for the next episode. If you like what you heard, consider subscribing, leaving a like, or sending us a message with your thoughts. Have a great day.